There are moments in life when you realize time is not just a number ticking away on a clock. It is a living, breathing rival, a silent opponent you can never truly defeat. But perhaps, if you are stubborn enough, you can run alongside it for a while. That was the thought lodged in my mind on the morning I decided to attempt something most people would dismiss as absurd: to chase the sun across 2 countries in a single day, keeping daylight alive for as long as possible. Not for money, not for a world record, not even for social media glory. This was for something far rarer, pure, unapologetic thrill. The rush of testing my limits, of seeing if I could push against the relentless march of time, even if just for one fleeting day. The idea that refused to leave. It began innocently enough, just a half-serious conversation with a friend in a dimly lit cafe. We were both hunched over mugs of coffee, bleary-eyed from long work weeks, when the topic drifted to time zones and jet lag. My friend, with a smirk, said, "What if you just kept flying with the sun so it never set?" It was meant as a throwaway joke, but it hit me like a spark in dry tinder. Something about the absurdity of the idea clung to me. The romanticism of outrunning nightfall, the strange mix of science and adventure, the thought of stretching a single day to its absolute limit, it all began to take root in my mind. Most people would have laughed, paid the bill, and moved on. I, however, went home that evening and opened my laptop. That joke turned into hours of research. Flight schedules, train timetables, sunrise and sunset calculators all became tabs in my browser. The more I looked, the more I realized this could be done, but it had to be precisely done. This was not a leisurely journey. It would be a race with almost no room for error. One late boarding call, one missed connection, and the sun would slip ahead forever. For 2 weeks, I lived in spreadsheets and aviation websites. I plotted routes and calculated angles, comparing time zones and latitudes. I had to move east just fast enough to stay with the sun, but not so far that I leapfrogged into night too early. Every second would matter. The start line, city of first light Lisbon, Portugal, my chosen starting point. It is one of the first major European cities to greet the sun each morning, and I wanted to begin the race where dawn feels like a gift. The air was cold that morning, the kind of damp chill that seeps into your bones before sunrise. I arrived at the airport hours before my flight, the terminal still half asleep. My backpack was deliberately light, just enough for a day's journey. Passport, phone, charger, a small notebook, and a single bottle of water. At 6:10 a.m., as the first golden light spilled over Lisbon's rooftops, my plane's wheels lifted from the runway. The sky outside the window was painted in pink and gold, the clouds glowing like embers. I glanced at the in-flight map and saw our tiny plane crawling eastward. The sun held its position just above the horizon, as if daring me to try and keep up. First leg Portugal to France. The first stretch Lisbon to Paris was deceptively easy. A flight of just under 2 hours, but here was the trap. The sun moves fast. Even in that short time, daylight advances aggressively. By the time we touched down in Paris, it was mid-morning. The airport was alive with movement, a tide of travelers streaming between gates. I had no time for coffee, no time to linger. I sprinted from one terminal to the next, clutching my boarding pass like it was a golden ticket. Paris to Warsaw was up next. And this was where the race began in earnest. The race intensifies. As the second plane climbed above the clouds, I began to understand something crucial. Chasing the sun is not just about raw speed, it is about precision. If you lose even 20 minutes, the sun will creep away from you, and there is no catching it once it slips over the edge of the sky. Somewhere over Germany, I pressed my forehead to the cold glass of the window. The sun seemed fixed in place, hanging at a stubborn angle. I could almost imagine it watching me, amused by my efforts, daring me to falter. Crossing into Poland, Warsaw greeted me with air that bit at my cheeks, crisp, sharp, and bracing. My watch read 1:40 p.m., but the quality of light felt like late morning. I had gained a small advantage. For the first time that day, I felt the faintest sense of control. Warsaw was not my destination, but it was my pivot point. From here, the journey would stretch longer. The next leg was the gamble Warsaw to Istanbul. 3 hours in the air, plenty of time for delays to build, for fatigue to set in, for the sun to slip ahead. The longest leap. The Warsaw to Istanbul flight was where the tension really settled in my chest. I had a window seat, but for much of the journey, I barely looked outside. Instead, I tracked our speed and trajectory on my phone, comparing it with the Earth's rotation. Halfway through the flight, my stomach dropped. A blanket of thick clouds spread beneath us, blotting out the sun completely. It felt like my opponent had disappeared into the mist, leaving me to guess its position. I hated not knowing. Touchdown in Istanbul. We landed at 6:20 p.m. local time. For most people, that is the beginning of the evening. But Istanbul's eastern position meant the sun still had a few more minutes of height in the sky. The airport was a maze, and I raced through it with tunnel vision, ignoring the scent of food and the chatter of travelers. I grabbed a fresh bottle of water from a kiosk, earning a puzzled look from the cashier as I bolted towards my final gate. The last leg was Istanbul to Tel Aviv, a short flight, but the most critical. If I mistimed this, the sun would sink into the sea before I could reach the shore. The final chase. As the plane lifted from the runway, the cabin filled with that amber light that only comes at the edge of sunset. I leaned back in my seat, every nerve alert. The Mediterranean stretched below us, its surface shimmering under the last orange glow. The sun seemed to hover, reluctant to surrender. Minutes before landing, the horizon sharpened, the light softened, and then, as we descended towards Tel Aviv, I realized I had done it. The day was still alive. Victory on the shore touched down at 7:45 p.m. local time. The sun hung low, clinging stubbornly to the edge of the Mediterranean. I stepped outside into the warm evening air and just stood there, watching. From dawn in Lisbon to sunset in Tel Aviv, I had stretched a single day to its very edge. 2 countries, multiple flights, a relentless opponent. It was not simply a travel stunt, it was proof that sometimes the most absurd challenges are the ones worth pursuing because they show you just how precious every single hour can be. What the race really meant. In chasing the sun, I learned something that will stay with me forever. We live as though time is endless, as though there will always be another chance, another tomorrow. We let days slip by unnoticed. But when you are literally running against the rotation of the earth, every minute matters. Every decision counts. You stop waiting for the perfect day because you finally understand it is today. The quiet moments between. Somewhere in the blur of airports, boarding calls, and quick glances at departure screens, I realized something unexpected. This race was not just about the rush. There were brief, almost invisible moments between the chaos where I felt a strange calm. Like sitting in a half-empty gate in Warsaw, watching sunlight spill through tall glass windows onto the polished floor, hearing a distant announcement in a language I barely understood, and sipping lukewarm water on the flight to Istanbul, feeling the hum of the engines and the weight of the day pressing gently against my shoulders. In those pauses, the race faded from a competition into something more intimate, a private conversation between me and the day itself. I was not just chasing the sun anymore, I was learning to notice it, to really see it in a way I never had before. It made the victory in Tel Aviv not just a triumph of timing, but a celebration of presence. If you enjoyed this journey, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more adventures that blur the line between impossible and unforgettable. Who knows, maybe the next race will be against the moon.